From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun once again with me, Andre Johnson Jr. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review, leave some comments below if you're watching us on YouTube. Speaking of that, if you are watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can get that bell notification when we drop that fire content as we do 3 times a week. It is Thursday. We're kind of resettled into this Monday, Wednesday, Thursday routine. Yeah. I ain't mad at it. It's what we've been doing. And so if you're here, understand that might be the new 3-day routine, at least for now, until we feel like changing it again. But for now, this is a Thursday. We are talking Saints football as we always do on this podcast. And one player and one story that really probably should have been dove into more than we just hadn't been able to do it as much when it happened, considering who this is, was Marshon Lattimore and his status with the Saints. And that's where we want to talk about. That's where we want to go today with the big picture.
Absolutely. Saints head coach Dennis Allen spoke at the Combine, and he kind of touched on Lattimore's future with the team. He said, quote, "Lattimore is on our team. He's a good football player. He's been a good football player for us. And so obviously there's a lot of things that happen throughout the offseason, but Lat is a big part of our team right now." Now, we went on to also mention Lattimore's injuries and that they will factor into any decision the team makes, but he does still consider Lattimore a guy who can help them win. Now, Sean, when you heard Dennis Allen talking about Lattimore, calling him a winning player, he said a lot of good things about him, but that right now kind of stuck out to me. What did you think when you heard
That's
that?
exactly what I thought as well. When he said right now, he left the door open. He's being intentionally non-committal because he can't back himself into a corner with the future of Marshon Lattimore because of what they did with the contract to make it possible for him to trade. Excuse me, bear with me today. I got a little scratchy throat today, but we'll be all right. But Marshon Lattimore's situation with his contract is certainly something that no one can ignore because you did that for a reason. Now, the contract adjustment, I must admit, as a guy that follows the salary cap quite a bit, is usually pretty into it when it comes to the math. This is a little bit of a complex one for me, so even that sort of made it a little more difficult. But nonetheless, Dennis Allen is doing what he has to do in this situation, praising the player while also not shutting the door on a possibility of trading a guy like Marshon Lattimore. Now, when we talk about trading a player, and the Saints have done this before, a higher-end player on your roster, think Brandon Cooks, think Jimmy Graham, it has happened before. Because when you talk about trading, you're talking about looking at a position of strength and a player who is the player that would be attractive to other clubs. So for them to identify Marshon Lattimore is not the craziest idea in the world because they have numbers in the secondary, and Marshon Lattimore has been a very good football player. In fact, when healthy, would it be a stretch to say he's the best player on your team?
Not at all.
Regardless of position, he's top 2 or 3 if he isn't. So, yeah, that's a guy that, if you're looking to, gain assets and at a position of strength when you could possibly lose and gain something that could help you, I could certainly understand why Marshon Lattimore's name has come up. So, 17 games, though. That's the magic number because it's 17 games in the last 2 seasons he has not missed. So he hasn't been healthy, so does that diminish his trade value? I think it could absolutely diminish his trade value if that's where he is certainly at. But like I said before, not the craziest idea to consider. I have never been tilted toward they're going to do this definitely. It felt like when they did that contract adjustment, it was to give them some time. But this is a different one because it flips the contract, part of his bonus, his contract into a roster bonus, which whoever team has him in 2024 would pay it, and it does that around a week before the start of the new regular season, not the new league year, the new regular season. So it almost forces this post-June 1st trade, which to me, it wouldn't force it, but because of the contract dynamics, if you do it before June 1st, it really is costly for your team just based off the dead money you would get. Post-June 1st, I'm not sure why you would even consider that just because you wouldn't get any compensation unless it's a player in his prime draft-wise until the following year. And I'm not for that. I'm not for giving up an asset this year to not get it the compensation return the following year. I need to have something for this year in the present day as well. So all these different layers to the Marshon Lattimore situation, and we're going to dive into it today. But all in all, it's just one of those situations where it feels like the Saints are just giving themselves the option, or giving themselves options with Lattimore. But I don't think, it doesn't feel like there's any momentum in either direction about trading him for next year.
Right, and we've talked at length about the fact that the Saints are essentially the oldest roster in the league. And when you're looking to trade somebody to get compensation back, as you mentioned, you have to look at what's appealing to other teams. And other teams are not giving you top-tier compensation for Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, the guys who are in their 30s, closer to the end than they are the beginning. Marshon Lattimore is 28 years old. He's in the prime of his career. And hypothetically, if you were to move Lattimore, if you're the Saints, you can live without him. Obviously, your secondary takes a hit. A lot of people consider Lattimore a top 5 cornerback in this league.
I would say so, yeah.
But even hypothetically, if you move him, you've got Paulson Adebo, who you can argue was the best defensive player on the team last season. You've got Alontae Taylor, who has been making those steps in his 2 years here. You've got a guy who both of us like a lot in Isaac Yiadom, who
If
we
they bring
think
him
had
back.
if they bring him back,
yeah.
had an underrated season last year. You've got Yiadom, so your cornerbacks, I'm not saying Lattimore, you can just get rid of him and keep that same level of production as you have when he's here, but you can certainly survive without him, I think, with the young guys on your team, hypothetically, if you were going to move him. But we talk about if you're going to move him, Sean, you're not just moving Lattimore for anything. What would you consider acceptable trade package to get a guy like that out the city?
And this is everything. And look, like I said before, I will reiterate it. I need something now. Yeah. I need something today. I need something when he leaves the building. I get something in return that I'm going to see on the football field in 2024.
And just a quick example for that, the reason why you don't want to play the long game there, a lot of people before the season considered the Los Angeles Rams, they were going to be the worst team in the league. At the beginning of last year, the Rams were supposed to be bottom feeders. The Rams had a pretty darn good season.
Yeah.
Imagine if you invest in one of those Rams picks thinking it's going to be top 3, top 5. Look at where it wound up. So, you don't want to play that long game. You want that pick right now with the draft.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, you don't know where that pick is going to end up in the future year, whereas this year you obviously know, and you need something in return for a guy like Marshon Lattimore. So, look, make no mistake about it, the Saints have a little bit of leverage here in terms of they can be choosy in terms of what compensation, what they want, and if they don't get close to that, then you just walk away from negotiations. But we did some research here just on some past cornerback contracts and past cornerback trades that have gone on, and honestly, the nearest one was 2023, Jalen Ramsey last year. The Dolphins gave up a 3rd-round pick and tight end Hunter Long to the Rams for Jalen Ramsey at 29 years old. Now, if you check Jalen Ramsey's stats, the big money stats when it comes to interceptions and pass breakups, it's a little bit higher than Marshon Lattimore. So that's a 3rd-round pick for a 29-year-old. Lattimore will turn 28, I believe, in May. Back in 2018, Marcus Peters, who at the time, was the best cornerback in football. I remember Drew Brees deliberately telling us we had the no Marcus Peters rule. In other words, you see Marcus Peters, you throw in the other direction. That's how good that guy was at that point. The Chiefs traded him, and a 2nd and a 4th-round pick was the compensation there for one of the guys who was in the prime of his career, having a fantastic career at that point, a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. The first time Jalen Ramsey was traded, back in 2019, from Jacksonville to the L.A. Rams, I believe. Yep. Yes. 2 firsts and a 4th. Okay, that's high. That's high, and that was back when the Rams were just trading and they didn't believe in draft picks at that point. They were trading everything, and then a couple other ones. 2020, remember AJ Boye?
That's a callback.
It was a disaster of a trade, but I think Denver it was. They gave up a 4th-round pick for AJ Boye. And if you go all the way back to Darrelle Revis, that's a little far back, and he was the best cornerback in football at that point, coming off a torn ACL, got a 1st and a 4th-round pick. So there was some other ones you had dug up as well, because
Yes.
there's been quite a bit when it comes to cornerback.
So yeah, a lot of the guys you mentioned were kind of at that number 1, number 2 cornerback in the league spots. They went for first and second round picks. I was looking at guys who are kind of where you may consider Marshon Lattimore in the cornerback hierarchy. Bradley Roby, at 28 years old, was traded here to the New Orleans Saints from Houston. The Saints gave them a 3rd and a 6th rounder. J.C. Jackson, 27 years old, traded from the Patriots to the Chargers this past season. They got a 6th rounder in return. Now, Marshon Lattimore is a little better than where you would consider J.C.
What was
Jackson.
J.C. Jackson's again?
J.C. Jackson was a 6th rounder in 2023. He was 27 years old. Then Darius Slay, back when he was with Detroit, 29 years old, traded to the Eagles for a 3rd and 5th round pick.
5th round pick, yeah.
So when I look at Marshon Lattimore and when I look at what I would expect teams to offer him, it's kind of in that range, that 3rd and 4th, 3rd and 5th, 3rd and 6th. You mentioned the 2nd. I think if you can get a 2nd from Marshon Lattimore, that's a winning deal right there.
To me, right now, the deal on the table that if I were the Saints, I would accept is if someone called and offered a 2nd round pick for Marshon Lattimore, I would accept that right away, because I think that's fair compensation for where Marshon Lattimore is at in his career at 28 years old, what he's done. What the Saints could certainly use in draft compensation this year, not next year, this year. We start playing with 3rd and 4th round picks. If it's a high 3rd round pick, maybe. But to me, if you're dipping into 3rd rounds, I need some more picks on the back end as well. I need a 3rd round and a 5th, a 3rd and a 4th, a 3rd and a 6th. If it's a high 3, maybe it's a 5th. If it's a low 3, maybe it's a 4. A 3 and a 4, a high 3. Even that's still kind of, I'm on the edge, but I might as well just keep them at that point. But if you're going to go 3rd round or lower, it's got to be more than one pick. If it's just one pick, it's got to be a 2nd round pick or higher for the trading, in my opinion, if I were GM of Marshon Lattimore anywhere. And look, as this is going on, and there's been a little bit of inaction with this, as we sit here right now, things can certainly change. And given the way that contract is set up, it's just weird. If they trade him before June or trade him for this year, I'm telling you, the cap situation, it actually hurts the Saints. Unless they can work out some weird deal where they can get the team trading for him to take on some of the dead money and put it on their books, and maybe that helps with the sliding scale of compensation. But, again, that's a complicated thing. For a clean trade of Lattimore this year, based off what it would cost, I think it's probably easier just for the Saints to keep him. And I honestly think as we sit right here, right now, I think he suits up for the Saints in 2024.
I agree with you. Now, one thing I will mention, when you look at the picks, and obviously a lot of this is going to change for every team in the next month or two until the draft. Right now, the Saints do not have a 3rd or a 4th round
Exactly.
pick. They have a 1st, a 2nd, 4 5ths, 2 6ths, and a 7th round pick. So for the Saints, that's a long time to go from your pick in the middle of the 2nd round all the way until the 5th round. That's a long time to not have any
That's a huge way to
picks.
go, and this is the year they need to fill that roster with some young, cheap, really quality football players, and I think that's coming. I think the wheeling and dealing for those middle-round picks is certainly coming, especially when we get the official list of all the compensatory picks. So, yeah, I could certainly understand that. I just don't know if Marshon Lattimore is the guy, if it's a late 3 or a late 4, that's the offer. I don't know. He's done so much good when he's healthy here, and I don't know if it's a sign of his health going down. It certainly felt like DA was a little hesitant about going there, but he does have to get healthier and be more available to be the standout player that he is. But to me, this all depends on compensation, and this contract makes it a little muddier for what you can actually do. So I'm going to get into that hole in the draft for the Saints, that 3rd, 4th round hole where after you have that 2nd round pick, you don't have anything for a long time, in a different pie, because I have my way of adding some of those picks, and we'll get into that in another pod. But I think as we sit here right now, I just think Lattimore is a Saint in 2024.
I agree with you. I think that the 1st round pick, that's not going to happen for Lattimore.
No.
I think, like you and I said, if you get a 2nd round, you take it. I don't know if somebody's offering a 2nd round pick for a 28-year-old corner who has had injury concerns the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what that 3rd and 4th is looking like. But gut feeling, I think Lattimore suits up in black and gold next season. I think he'll be a great help to the secondary if he can stay healthy. I think as a leader and as a veteran, because at this point, that's what he is. He's really, really helpful for a Paulson Adebo, who's young, Alante Taylor, who's young. Jordan Howden's a safety, but he's also in that secondary. You've got some young players out there who could really benefit from having Marshon Lattimore around. So if you made me pick right now, I say Lattimore stays in New Orleans, but definitely in the next month or two leading up to the draft, his name is going to be probably the top name thrown around in trade talks.
Yeah, how disappointed would you be if they don't trade him before the draft, so everyone thinks he's going to be a Saint, and then like a week before the season starts, which is when that conversion happens, they trade him off, and you don't get anything in return until the following year. I would be incredibly disappointed because I just think you need him this year if he's there, or you need the compensation this year if you're going to make that deal. So I just think that would be such a disappointment if they were to do that.
Right. And I mentioned, you can perhaps live without Lattimore because you've got talented young guys in that cornerback room, but to lose a guy like that who's considered a locker room leader, to lose him a couple weeks or even a month or so right before the season when you're getting ready to go to war, that's a blow to a team's psyche. That's a blow to that locker room, especially when you lose him and you don't see anything coming back for another, 9 months? Yeah,
and like you said, I mean, you don't know where that pick would land unless it's a player-for-player deal, which I guess is certainly possible. You don't see that a whole lot in the NFL, but you don't know where that pick is going to land at that point. So, yeah, I hope that's not the case. So I guess we'll see. But again, that contract that he adjusted, it makes it complicated either way. Like if you go before June 1st, you pay more. If you go after June 1st, you don't get the compensation until later. That's why I think unless it's a deal that just knocks your socks off, I say just keep him around. I mean, he's not old. He's 28 years old.
He's not. And we've seen Saints.
And this is the team that's been old. I mean, this is good to have an in-your-prime guy right now. So I just think it's probably in the best interest to keep him.
We've seen Saints cornerbacks as well go other places and show that they've still got it. You know, C.D. Deuce, when he went to Detroit, he had some good times in Detroit. Was it Patrick Robinson went to the Eagles, won a championship out there with them? So, it's if you're the Saints, Marshon Lattimore, if healthy, still has years of good football left in him. He's a locker room leader. He's a guy who you want around the young kids in your locker room. So unless you can get something that knocks your socks off, knocks your shoes off maybe, I say you keep Lattimore in black and gold.
Look, here's the thing. When healthy, he's still a dog. Yeah. Like he's still a
especially
really good football player. Like I said, a top 2 player, regardless of position, on your roster. So that's where we stand with Marshon Lattimore. Speaking of, before we get out of here, we said this was probably coming. It happened today, this Thursday. Cam Jordan did his restructured contract. Saints are now at about $16 million over. 1 or 2 restructures left. They'll get under. We'll see how far they get under enough to sign some free agents and obviously their draft class. But the Cam Jordan was interesting because, as I mentioned before, there's 2 columns. There's the bonus conversion way, which they could have did with Cam, but Cam was the only way you could have did it both ways, with the bonus conversion and the base salary conversion. Looks like, based on the numbers I've seen, they did both. So they got the $9 million in cap space. So they're at about $16 million over the cap. So we knew that was coming, but that's an older player that restructured his contract. So you want to keep those at a minimum if you can.
Right, and it's the Saints are gold medalists when it comes to salary cap gymnastics. They're going to do what they need to do to get way under that cap and still be able to make the moves they want to make. Cam Jordan, it feels like for the Saints, it feels like for both sides, they want to see Cam Jordan retire as a Saint. They don't want to see a situation, it seems, where Cam potentially ends his career anywhere else but New Orleans.
Certainly sounds like he wants to do that as well.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. We kind of knew that one was coming. I think that was unavoidable. I mean, I know I've said avoid the late 30s or late in their career post-30 player restructure, but I think Cam's was certainly unavoidable. Anything else for us today?
To expand on what you said about Cam, I think he's a special case. He's a guy who you could argue might be on the Mount Rushmore of Saints all the time.
No doubt about it.
And you look for the next domino, and to me, the first name that popped up was Ryan Ramczyk. We'll see what happens with him as the next couple of weeks go on, but just about a week ago, we were talking about the Saints being about $80 million over the cap. Now they're, $16 million? So it's happening in real time, day by day. The Saints are chopping down that number, and by the time the official league calendar starts, I'm sure there'll be 15, 20 mil, if not more, under the cap. And
yeah, we'll see how far
we'll
see how far. That's what I'm curious to see, how far under they go, because they don't have to go that far under. But if they keep going further and further under, it means they've got some free agents in mind that they want to bring in, and so they always want to give themselves options. But like I said before, I think this is the year to pay more on that student loan to get some of that debt squared away. So anyway, that'll do it for us here today. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.